I know you're out there. I know that you're afraid. You're afraid of us. You're afraid of change. I don't know the future. I didn't come here to tell you how this is going to end. I came here to tell you how it's going to begin. I'm going to hang up this phone, and then I'm going to show these people what you don't want them to see. A world without rules and controls, without borders or boundaries. A world where anything is possible. Where we go from there is a choice I leave to you.
The Krisanne Hall Show.
Any varmint that crosses that lady's path has met its match. Come on!
Rise and shine, liberty-loving patriots. Welcome to the Krisanne Hall Show. Krisanne Hall here, KrisanneHall.com. And I have Elizabeth with me this evening. As Elizabeth is my intern, she will be traveling with us for the next... Today's the 13th, right, Elizabeth?
Yes.
The next 7 days. We have just finished 3 days of the Liberty Tour here in Missouri and Illinois. And Elizabeth's going to be sitting in with me on the radio show and sort of like co-hosting, my sidekick, and just chiming in and talking. Sometimes we're going to talk about some things that Elizabeth's doing and some things that she does when she's not with us. And we're just going to talk about news from a constitutional perspective with a new youth injection. Elizabeth, introduce yourself one more time to everybody here on the Krisanne Hall Show.
Hey, you guys. I am Krisanne Hall's intern, and my name is Elizabeth Manley. I'm very excited to be here and have really enjoyed my travels with her. It's been a blast. I've enjoyed it.
So how old are you, Elizabeth?
I'm 17.
All right. So 17. And so now, so far, you have seen the 700 years of history.
Mm-hmm.
You have seen the religious liberty lesson.
Yes.
And you have seen the 5-hour workshop. You have been through the entire Constitutional Bill of Rights workshop and the state sovereignty presentation.
And they have all been absolutely incredible.
Now, you also, I forgot, saw my husband's presentation on the righteous resistance to civil authority. And so I want to ask you, which has been your favorite so far?
Oh, that's a killer. I would definitely say that they have all been absolutely incredible, but I have really enjoyed just the basic history of the Constitution. I know that sounds very basic, but I've loved learning the history of it and what our founders were thinking as they wrote it, and that it was an original document. We've had 700 years of history about that.
What was the most... Did you ever have an aha moment when we were doing the 700 years, thinking, wow, that's incredible, that makes a really big difference, and nobody ever taught me that, I didn't know that?
For the 700 years?
Mm-hmm.
Boy, now you put me on the spot. Let's see. There's definitely the whole... I never really had learned about the 1100 Charter of Liberties, and so that was definitely very interesting. And the whole thing in and of itself, seeing history repeating, was really, really good to see, too. And you can look at
and those of you who have not heard the history, the 700 years of history, the Roots of Liberty genealogy presentation, what Elizabeth is talking about, the fact that the history that created our Constitution that began back in 1014, the details of those conflicts between people and government are being repeated today in this century with great, great precision. And so that is, I think that's probably the most common thing that I hear from people, Elizabeth, this crazy understanding of how precisely history repeats and how we're able throughout, because of history, to learn from that.
Yeah.
And we could have stopped everything that's happening to us today, and we're not. And, something we're going to talk about today has to do with the sovereignty training, the state sovereignty training. Remember, states are not colonies. They are
They are sovereign countries.
Sovereign countries, yay. And as sovereign countries, they have the power that is superior to the federal government. And today, 15 attorneys general from 15 states are fighting. Now, I'm carefully wording this because I don't agree specifically what they're doing, but I do agree with what they're doing in spirit. So they are fighting to oppose the Environmental Protection Agency's Clean Power Plan and arguing that the rules are far-reaching, that they're job-killing, and that the EPA does not have the legal authority to carry out these regulations. Now, where these states are going wrong is that they are suing the federal government to be exempt from these EPA regulations. Now, the states are independent and sovereign. The federal government does not have the power to engage in environmental protection. That should be clear to anyone who understands the Constitution. The problem is that we're under this impression that the Supreme Court has been given by the Constitution the power to interpret the Constitution to give the federal government more power. That's totally not what we learned, right? Yeah. That James Madison said that to put the courts superior to the states would be the destruction of liberty and the destruction of the Constitution. And so these states are suing the federal government over the EPA, what they claim is overstepping its regulatory authority. How do they think that's going to work out? I mean, seriously. The states are going to sue the EPA in federal court with federal judges. Do we really think that the federal court is going to rule in favor of the states?
They're not really going about it right.
So what should they be doing, Elizabeth? What did we learn?
Well, by having this this judgment, or this having the federal judges coming and making this ruling about opinion.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
See, we're learning.
We are. Having these opinions about the EPA, that means that they are giving the federal government the power to be over and more sovereign than the states.
That's right. Yay! By submitting themselves to the courts, they actually admit that the courts have the authority to make this decision, and that is awesome. The courts don't have the authority to expand the federal government's power. So the states should be just simply refusing the EPA's access to their state. That's it. The federal government has no authority through the Constitution to regulate the environment or to manage the land of any state. The only authority the Constitution gives to the federal government over land is the land that encompasses 10 square miles for Washington, D.C., for the capital of the federal government, and the specific amount of land necessary to operate forts and ports. That's it. No more land. The EPA is so incredibly unconstitutional and so incredibly outside the realm of constitutional authority that the states should be operating in such a way where they don't sue the federal government. They simply say, you know what, we're sick of this EPA stuff. You're not allowed to do this. We're not going to let you do this. And we are going to simply deny you the authority to regulate our land. Because guess what? You were never delegated it to begin with. Your use of the EPA to regulate us is a stolen authority. Regulation of land, regulation of environment, regulation of resources is a power that is reserved to the states. And so the federal government doesn't have that power, and all the states need to do is stand by the Constitution and simply say, no, you will not be allowed to exercise your stolen power here. And any regulation that the EPA creates is simply null and void. I'm going to put you on the spot again, Elizabeth. Do you remember what Jefferson called that act? The one that got me in trouble with the Florida senator.
I don't remember the name of the act, but I know that the word nullification.
Yeah, nullification. And that's exactly what they should be doing. Madison called it interposition. Mm-hmm. And it's simply the states exercising their reserved power, securing the power that has been reserved to them, and protecting the property, the liberties, and the lives of the people. Because here's what's going to happen. This is why the states don't want to do this. This is why the states do not want to operate constitutionally. It's the same thing that's happening with the Planned Parenthood thing. Now, there are several states, because of these Planned Parenthood videos, who have vowed to defund the Planned Parenthoods. Alabama was one. Oh, who was the other one? It's in this article somewhere. I can't remember. But anyway, so we have these states who are exercising their power because the federal government's not delegated any power to regulate, manage, or fund health care in the Constitution. That is a power they've stolen from the states and a power that they have exercised illegally. And so these states are saying, look, if the feds aren't going to defund Planned Parenthood, we are, because that is well within our realm of reserved power. And so what is the White House saying? Well, if you don't fund Planned Parenthood, we're going to pull your Medicaid funding. That's why these states want to sue, so that they can get the courts to back them up, and then the federal government can't withdraw their federal funding. And they don't want to operate without federal funding. You see these encroachments. This federal funding we've become addicted to, like a real addictive drug, and it has enslaved us to the federal government instead of kept us independent and sovereign.
Krisanne Hall Show. She's Liberty's lobbyist.
Welcome back. What are we going to do about our crack-like addiction to federal funding and federal strings and federal encroachment? Who you depend on for money is who rules and reigns over you. Our states have traded their sovereignty for federal funding. And this is going to be the next major battle, Elizabeth. We are going to see the states having to choose between the liberty of the people and funding. But you know what's funny, Elizabeth? I think they're going to find out something very surprising. I think if they stand their ground, that they are going to find out that not only do they not need federal funding, but they'll do a whole lot better without it. Because with federal funding comes federal regulations. And federal regulations are charged on our states. So the states have to come up with their own money to comply with the federal funding. And if we cut out the federal funding out, then we don't have to pay to comply with all those regulations. Then the states can keep that money. Then maybe, what do you think? The people will say, hey, why are we paying the federal government to do these things that we're doing for ourselves? And then maybe we'll stop. You asked us today about paying our taxes. in light of the fact that our tax dollars are being spent to fund the human trafficking of baby parts, American baby parts.
Mm-hmm.
And how, as we as Christians, how can we fund that with our tax dollars in conscience? Now, you're 17. Tell me, why would you think about something like that?
Well, recently I actually handed out flyers to raise awareness about what Planned Parenthood was doing, and I was shocked to discover that American taxpayers are actually paying Planned Parenthood $540 million a year. And that totally shocked me, and it grieved me, too, to see that we as Americans, the land of the free, the home of the brave, we're not doing anything about this, and we're paying them nonetheless. And we as Christians need to take a stand for life because it is a fundamental right, an inalienable right.
And so, tell me a little. Let's stop here for just a second. Tell me a little bit about your experience about handing out these flyers with Planned Parenthood. About Planned Parenthood. Where were you and what were you doing?
I was in a little tiny town. It's about 1,000 people. And
where? What state?
Idaho,
Okay.
Kuski, Idaho, and it was a parade that we were at, and I just kind of got. I realized everything that Planned Parenthood was doing, and I was very sad to see and hear this happening. And so the Lord kind of laid it on my heart and made the opportunity open up where I could get together with two of my friends, and we went and began to hand out these flyers and have conversations with people. And so many people just are so ignorant of what Planned Parenthood is doing. And so I think it was helpful, and it was a wonderful opportunity for us as well, a great experience to hand these out because it really educated people on what they were funding.
Were people surprised by what you were telling them?
They were very surprised and flat out they were horrified. They were truly horrified.
Well, because it is horrifying.
It is.
And the problem that we have is that we're talking about this. The media is talking about this in terms of women's health. Mm-hmm. I don't understand how human trafficking. See, that's what we need to be calling this, human trafficking. When you take humans and sell them to the highest bidder, that is human trafficking. When you take the parts of humans and sell them to the highest bidder, that is trafficking of humans in their parts.
Absolutely.
And we should be calling this human trafficking. And we're not. I don't know why. We got outraged when the Boko Haram were trafficking the little African girls, and we had this Michelle Obama putting up her hashtags, and everybody in the media outraged over the human trafficking that we see all over the world. And yet we fund, what was that number again? How much do we fund?
$540 million a year.
$540 million a year, America, your taxpayers go to fund human trafficking. In America, that should never happen.
So don't let them steal your light. Don't let them break your stride. There is light on the other side. You'll see all the raindrops falling. It's a revolution.
The Krisanne Hall Show. She's Liberty's lobbyist.
So welcome back to the Krisanne Hall Show, and we are talking with Elizabeth, my intern, about her experiences with handing out pamphlet information, making people aware of the realities of the atrocities of Planned Parenthood, and the fact that we are spending how much, Elizabeth?
$540 million a year.
$540 million a year. Taxpayer dollars funding human trafficking of Americans. And so I want to talk about this a little further because I'm really proud about this. Elizabeth, how many of your friends did this with you?
I was only able to have 2 with me that day.
And how old were they?
One is 23 and the other is 17.
So we had a 23-year-old and 2 17-year-olds handing out pamphlets at a public parade educating about the atrocities of human trafficking and the fact that we're funding this.
Yes.
Now, I want everybody to realize that this is really, really what everybody should be doing. We should never go to a public event without something to hand out, because that is the exercise of our rights. You know, how many of our listeners right now, without looking, can recite all 5 liberties codified in the First Amendment? All 5 liberties recognized in the First Amendment. You know, we have a Supreme Court justice in Florida who did a poll and found out that only 2% of the people polled could name all 5 liberties without looking at some kind of resource. Maybe that's why people aren't handing out pamphlets, because they don't realize they have the right to do that.
Yeah.
And when we don't do that, it's as if we don't have the right at all, isn't it? I mean, think about that. Having the right. What good is having the right if we don't do it? What if I'm broke down on the side of the road? I have a flat tire. And I walk around the car and I'm like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? I've got this flat tire. How am I going to... I'm going to get somewhere. I got to get to a gas station. I got to get somewhere. I got to get a tire. I got to get somebody to help me. And I'm just standing there and standing there and standing there. And finally somebody pulls over to help me. And I said, look, I got this flat tire. Will you take me to the gas station? Will you help me find a tow truck that will come and help me with my flat tire? And the guy says, sure. And we go in town. He drives me into town. We get into a tow truck. We come back. The tow truck driver gets out and looks at the car. Yep, you got a flat tire. And then he says, you have a flat tire. Do you have a spare in the trunk? And I said, well, yes, I do. And he says, well, why don't we change the tire? Okay. Do you see what I'm telling you here? I had a spare tire the whole time. I didn't need a tow truck driver to come out here and tow my truck.
Right.
Because I had a spare tire the whole time. But the fact that I refused and failed to use that spare tire was exactly the same as not having one at all.
Yeah.
And that's what happens when we don't exercise our rights. It's as if we don't have them at all. The more accustomed we get to not having them, the less likely we are to miss them when they're gone.
Right.
And so what you guys did was important. Do you think that you really impacted anybody who received the information?
I think that we did impact people. I think that they need it, even if it didn't necessarily change a vote or something nationally important. It still educated them, and they were able to see the truth, and they accepted the truth, and they agreed with us. We found people who were anxious to know more and called us back to talk to their friends because they love the truth, and then there's something about the truth that sets you free.
So you told some people, and they're like, hey, you got to come tell our friends about this?
Yeah, we were talking to some people, and we were coming back up the street, and they waved us over and like, okay, these people need to hear what you told us. And so we had the opportunity to share with some more people.
That is so awesome.
It was incredible.
That is awesome. And you know, that in itself is self-encouraging. When you engage in these rights and you get this confirmation that the people don't know and they want to know. Because I think we operate sometimes under a misconception that people choose to be ignorant.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody chooses to believe a lie. I think they believe lies out of laziness, apathy maybe. It doesn't really affect them, so they don't really need to know much about that. And so putting this information in their hands tells them, this is what you're missing. And it opens their eyes. And I agree with you, Elizabeth. You know, we spoke to a group tonight, and I bet that most national speakers would have shown up at that group and thought, what, there's like 30 people here. Why am I wasting my time? I could have done so much, in this time rather than drive all the way out here and spend 2 hours teaching 30 people. But it's all about perspective, isn't it?
It is.
You didn't change the world. But how do you know that, Elizabeth? How do you know that? What if you reached one person one young person who will grow up and become involved in government and be that one person who will end these atrocities for America? Be that one person like James Otis Jr. or Mercy Otis Warren or Penelope Barker who will change the face of America. When we taught tonight, there were 30 people, maybe 30 people. But you know what I saw? I saw a 9-year-old little boy and she was 11. Was she 11?
10, actually.
10?
Yeah.
A 10-year-old little girl who were so excited. Weren't they? I mean, seriously.
They were thrilled. They were absolutely thrilled.
And they were giddy. The little girl she sat through the history lesson. She got a copy of my book. She ran up to me. She was bouncing up and down. Will you please sign my book? And she was telling me all about the stuff that she learned and how she was going to take the book and learn so much more. That's what it's all about. Because that little boy, Ethan, and Joanna, that was James Otis Jr. That was Mercy Otis Warren. That was the future of liberty. And we played a part in that. We were a role in that. And if it were just the two of those children in that room that we were teaching, that was worth everything.
It was.
Absolutely worth everything. And then Ethan gave his little prayer. We asked to close the event in prayer. And of all the adults, nobody raised their hand. I said, I'd like to have a volunteer to lead us in prayer as we close. And of all the adults, nobody raised their hand. And Ethan did. 9-year-old Ethan said, I'll do it. And I said, Ethan, you want to lead us in prayer? I think that's beautiful. I think we should just let you do that. And his prayer, dear God, let us take what we've learned tonight and apply it to our lives. Oh my goodness, I'm crying again. It was hard for me to hold it together while I was praying. Please let us take what we have learned tonight. The 9-year-old, please let us take what we have learned tonight and apply it to our lives. Please let us take what we've learned tonight to teach others so people in our future can apply this in their lives. I was floating on air. Absolutely floating on air. And I don't know how about you felt about that, Elizabeth, but that is my payment. Yeah. That's why we work by faith. Because people are like, well, I have people all the time who tell me, Krisanne, your information and the way you teach is so compelling and so valuable. You should be making tons of money. Ethan paid me $1 million tonight. Joanna paid me $1 million tonight. And that's all I need. My rewards come in different ways and in different places. I don't need what the world needs. And this is what we're doing. And watching the young people, you know what, maybe Ethan and Joanna will go out and hand out pamphlets at their next meeting. And these are the kind of things that we want to do. We need to get over this brainwashing that the federal government is engaging in. Our federal government is threatening states. Threatening them. I want you to think about this, because you see, the states created the federal government. That means the states are the creators of the federal government. That means you can't create, by natural law and logic and all principles of the universe, you cannot create something greater than yourself. It's a natural order. So that means when the states created the central government, they created a government inferior to themselves. The states are the master, by all logic, by all natural law, by all principle. The states are superior to the federal government. And now we have the creation shaking its finger at the Creator and threatening the Creator. If you don't agree with us, we're going to hurt you. Are you kidding me? How could a state be even intimidated by its own creation? That would be like my 9-year-old standing there shaking in my face. If you don't let me have cookies and pudding and chocolate milk and milkshakes for dinner, I'm gonna get you. Really? Fine then. I'm not gonna let you have that stuff. You just go right ahead and see what you're gonna do to me.
Exactly.
That's what the state should be doing. And we have the federal government stating that federal laws require state Medicaid programs to cover family planning services and supplies for anyone at childbearing age, and their defunding of Planned Parenthood is illegal. $540 million a year, right? Do you know what this federal agency is telling us? Even more about $540 million. We have so much to learn from what they've just said. And when we come back after the break, I'm going to explain it. Because this is very, very important. The federal laws and the HHS worker has just told us something very, very important.
Don't censor my voice. Hate me if you won't, or love me if you can. If the truth is what you want, then you found your man. I ain't backing down, I ain't backing up. If you think like I think, then crank it on up. I won't back up, I don't back down. I've been raised up to stand my ground. Take my job, but not my guns. Tax my check till I ain't got none, except for the good Lord up above. I answer to no one.
The Krisanne Hall Show. She's Liberty's lobbyist.
Welcome back. The Department of Health and Human Services is threatening our states, telling them that if they refuse to fund Planned Parenthood, they are violating the law. That if they refuse to fund human trafficking and abortion, they are violating the laws of Medicaid and denying federal mandated services. That's what they're saying. They're telling us that they believe that Medicaid mandates states pay for abortion. Federal laws require state Medicaid programs to cover family planning services and supplies for anyone of childbearing age, and that defunding Planned Parenthood would illegally limit beneficiaries' access to that care and services. Do you know what that means? That means, according to the federal government, it is against the law to defund abortion. Do you know there's a federal law that makes it illegal for federal dollars to fund abortion? It's called the Hyde Amendment, and the Hyde Amendment makes it illegal to use federal funding to fund abortion. And this federal agency is now telling us that it's illegal for us to follow the law. And that's why I say to the states, and that's why James Madison said to the states, and Thomas Jefferson said to the states, and Alexander Hamilton said to the states, and John Calhoun said to the states, and all our framers said to the states, that the only way to control the federal government is for the states to deny them their power and to take that power from them. And the biggest the biggest control we have is funding. The federal government has become totally lawless. Do you see that? They are declaring that a law prohibiting the spending of federal dollars on abortion is now unlawful, and the very act of prohibiting the dollars to spend for abortion is unlawful. That defies all logic. It defies all reason. And that's why the states need to look at HHS and tell them, fine, go take a long walk off a short pier. Go take a flying leap. We are going to maintain the law. We're going to maintain our sovereignty. We believe that human trafficking is wrong, even if it's done here in the United States. And we will not allow that to be funded in our states. Hey, this is so very important. These states standing up against this. They have the authority. They have every legal authority. They have every constitutional authority to do this. And I would love to see some states just step up and say, we'll take care of health care for ourselves. We're not going to be accepting your regulations. We'll provide the necessary services that we need. And we don't need your funding and we don't need your regulation. And by the way, we're not going to let our residents, our citizens of our state, send you any money to fund this stuff either. We're going to back them when they refuse to pay their taxes, their federal taxes that go to funding this. And we're going to secure our state borders, and we're going to eliminate the IRS's jurisdiction in our state. You will not seize their property, you will not garnish their wages, and you will have no threat against the people of our states. That's exactly what the states should be doing. And that's the only solution. You know what I find ironic is the HHS acts like Planned Parenthood is the only place in the communities that provide family planning services. Do you know there are states that have family planning services everywhere where not a single facility conducts a single abortion? This is all hype. This is all hype. And it's time for us to speak up and start defending liberty. God bless everybody. See you tomorrow.